into why getting involved is seriously the next big thing for us? Buckle up, because we're about to unwrap all the epic reasons why being in the game is where it's at. Hey Jace.
Hey Krista.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing awesome. Hey young agents, my name is Krista Couts. I'm with Berrong Insurance Agency and I'm a producer.
Hey young agents, my name is Jace Riggs. I'm the principal at Riggs & Associates Group in Ardmore, Oklahoma. So here's the deal. We're not just talking about checking boxes. We're talking about unlocking doors to success, leveling up your skills, and shaping the industry like the bosses we are. Ready to dive in?
Reason number one, young agents helps you level up your skills. Let's be real fam, staying involved means keeping tabs on what's popping in the industry. Lunch bunches, happy hours, conferences, and other events, that is where we beef up our knowledge and show the world we mean business.
Reason number two, you'll connect and conquer. Remember that saying, your network is your net worth? Totally true. Getting in the mix means we meet legends in the field, make friends, and set the stage for partnerships that could be straight up legendary.
Reason number three, we make an impact. Seriously, it's not all business suits, peeps. We're talking community vibes, giving back, and using our voice to make things better. Getting involved isn't just about us, it's about making waves that impact lives.
Well, if that's not enough, reason number four, shape the game. We young agents have some seriously fresh perspectives. Being part of associations and groups means we're not just followers, we're shapers and influencers. Our ideas and energy can seriously shake things up. It's our time to shine in this great industry, and if you want to be a part of that future and leading where it goes, we're the group to jump in and tackle that task.
Reason number five, young agents grows you inside and out. Y'all, this isn't just about business cards and suits, it's about pushing boundaries, stepping up, and leveling up. Speaking up, leading teams, and facing challenges, that is how we become real deal leaders.
And here's the best part, it's free for us to jump in. If your agency's a part of the Big I, Oklahoma, you're under 40, or have less than 5 years in the industry, guess what? You're in, no strings attached. If you meet this criteria, just show up to an upcoming event listed on our website.
So, Oklahoma young agents, are you ready to own it? Time to grab opportunities, own your voice, and level up together.
Let's kickstart this adventure, rock the insurance game, and show what the young agents of our industry are made of.
Hi there, Oklahoma. I'm so glad to be here with you today in July for AgencyWISE, and obviously a little bit of a change in people today. Sarah Bradshaw Ray asked me to sit in for her. And it's kind of exciting. I think I actually got certified in Kolbe 20 years ago this year, which is kind of shocking in and of itself, or at least pretty close to it. So it's fun to be here. I know a lot of you out there that are joining us today, and so happy to have you. For some of you, this might be a little bit of a refresher course, so if maybe you've slept a little bit since then. But what I'm really thrilled to do today is actually have Avery Moore and Stewart Berrong joining us here in a few minutes to talk about how they're actually using the application for Kolbe in their agencies. And I know that when we talk about Kolbe, it can sound quite abstract and what does it all mean? And so we're going to try and distill it down and make sure that you know exactly what those applications could look like. We're going to specifically talk about ways you can use it and how these agencies are using it. And certainly Sarah is a great resource for you after this if you want to dabble or dig in just a little bit more deeply. So let's get after it. We're going to start with just the definition of success. So if we put that slide up, here we go. Kathy Kolbe built Kolbe years ago, this assessment. And I love this definition where she says the definition of success is the freedom to be yourself. And so when we talk about things in the Kolbe world, what we're talking about is being really good about talking about what the end result is that we're looking for from people, as opposed to thinking about how you go about it, because everyone sort of has their own way. And maybe the best way to describe it to you is think about the things that you do that you think, boy, I'm so energized and I could do that all day, versus, wow, I'm exhausted when I do that. And that's what Kolbe really assesses for at the end of the day. So we use it for all sorts of organizations, big and small. Sometimes I'll have somebody ask me, well, you know, based on how big we are, should we or shouldn't we actually use Kolbe? Every size, one person, two people, hundreds of people, thousands of people, it doesn't really matter. So I know you've got agencies out there that sit on all sides. And we'll talk a little bit about how you get into this, maybe start at the leadership level and get some buy-in before you cascade it too far in the organization. But we use it to really help people have jobs that really help them be more productive and make sure we're aligning talent, which we'll talk about that language here in a minute, with the appropriate role. So I have the best chance of success and what I would call sustainability. I want somebody to have a job that at the end of the day, they feel energized when they finish at the end of the day, as opposed to exhausted, and they have the capacity and capability to do it as much as possible. And then we certainly use it for team chemistry. So in fact, this week I was with the Oklahoma board and we're talking about strategic plans and so forth. Well, in that, we want people in the boardroom who think and challenge each other in different ways. And so it's always nice to have that mix. It can be frustrating sometimes if you're not wired that certain way, but knowing where people can come from can certainly help in the boardroom, in your staff and your agencies and so forth. And that's really what we want to make sure that we're leveraging it for, as always. So one of the things that I really just want to make sure that you understand is that there is no bias. They've never found any statistics that show, you know, one gender tests one way or an age another way, or race and so forth. So it really is equal energy out there. Now, granted, you could end up with a lot of fact finders, let's say, in a room if a lot of detail are required because you've attracted those people. But if we went out to the general population, there's really an even split out there of what energy looks like. More to come on that. We also always think about it based on strengths. So it's predictive. When I know somebody's Kolbe, it's really easy to expect and see what they're going to do. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And frankly, they've also found that it's highly valid and reliable. So we don't change over time. We are kind of who we are at the end of the day. And so unless you test one time in what is called a transition result, you are going to be who you are most of your career when you're applying yourself. So we'll walk through those pieces. They did a study 20 years, and statistically 90% of people tested the same. So we just are who we are. So if you don't like who you are, we're just gonna have to help figure that out for you so you do. And what I love is our guests today look very different. So you'll hear different perspectives from each other as well. So now what Kolbe is not about, though, is it's not about how smart you are and what you can or can't do. So I'll always say, you can't use Kolbe as an excuse and say, I can't do that, because that's cognitive. And so we'll visit about what that means at the end of the day. So you can't say I can't do it because of my Kolbe. You may wish you didn't need to do it. You might avoid it because of your Kolbe, but you can do it. And then it's not about your personality or social style or what you want or don't want. So I could actually have two people with identical Kolbes, but one could be wildly extroverted and optimistic, and one person could be highly introverted. So there is no correlation from a personality perspective. So I'm going to give you the quick crash course on the fact that we do have three parts to our mind. We're not going to cover cognitive today, which is essentially your knowledge, your skills, and your abilities. And so that's what you can or can't do. Problems that you'd have in the workplace that are cognitive in nature are going to be, I don't know how to do that. I've never seen that risk before. I don't know what the carrier's appetite is. And so usually, assuming you have the aptitude to learn, and IQ would sit in this and so forth, it's just time on the job, learning, mentoring, shadowing, those kinds of things. So assuming that's the case, so that's cognitive. We certainly want to make sure we've got people who have the cognitive skills for their jobs. And then we also want to make sure that they fit from an affective perspective, which is, how are they motivated and their value systems. And this is where personality really falls into place as well. So what we find is, you've seen the tests like Myers-Briggs, and Enneagram's a fun one, and StrengthsFinder, and my new favorite one is called Working Genius. Hold on for that one. That's a fun one. That's a Patrick Lencioni one. But essentially what we want to do is also understand what somebody's personality looks like on that affective side. And problems you'd see in the workplace might be personality conflicts, prejudices, I'm motivating you in a way that demotivates you, so forth and so on. And usually to solve those, it's usually coaching. As long as it's not an ethical issue, right? You might have to just work together to agree to disagree, for lack of a better way to put it. So when we're putting teams together, very often we think about, do they have the skill set to do it? Do they fit well with us? And we sometimes look at this third part. And if we're not using Kolbe, we aren't looking at it. And we really want that sweet spot. I can do it. I love this fit to me. And I'm energized, because what Kolbe tests for are your striving instincts and your problem solving methods and so forth. And really talking about your strengths at the end of the day. The problem that you see in the workplace that's conative in nature, which is what Kolbe tests for, is mental exhaustion and burnout. So if you can think about things that you do and you think, wow, that really just burns me out. So for some people, burnout is every time they get interrupted all day long. So I'm somebody who wants my head down working and the phone just keeps ringing and ringing and I keep getting disrupted. Or someone keeps walking by me and is disrupting me all the time. Or maybe exhaustion is I have to sit at my desk all day because I'm somebody who's got to get up and move around and have activity. So we're going to talk about those examples. But those are the three areas when we're hiring, we're putting teams together, we know that we want it to fit all the way. So hopefully you're all following me at this point. I know it's a lot to take on the first go around. So Kolbe tests for your creative process, and here's how it works. First of all, you have to be in a striving mode. When you're in a striving mode and you care about something, you're motivated. So first I've got to have this motivation, then my instincts kick in, then there's got to be free will. No one's telling me how to do this. And then this red stop sign kicks in and says, hold on, wait a second. You don't know what you're doing. So all these ingredients have to be at play in order for us to take purposeful action. And you'll see somebody's Kolbe problem solving. All right. So when I can look at something and say, this is what I would predict this person to do, and they're not, then something's broken in this process. And I love that they call it the creative process, because we can be creative in the way that we research or simplify or design or break and cut corners or think outside the box or stabilize or build or imagine. So we're all creative. It's just how are we defining it at the end of the day, and how am I bringing it to the table? All right. So we have these 4 modes, which I'm going to talk about in some detail just so you get a good sense of it. But you've got fact finder, which is really about information and how you gather it, versus follow through, which is not completing something. So that's something important to understand. In the Kolbe world, follow through is how well organized you are versus how you adapt. Quick start would be your move towards innovation versus stabilization. And implementer would be building it and demonstrating versus abstract and vision. So when we look at the results, first of all, we have to understand they're all on a scale from 1 to 10. And the important thing to understand is there is no value associated with the numbers that you have. So you would never look at a number and say, oh, my 2 is better than your 8, or my 10 is better than your 1. We don't have a lot of 10s or 1s out there, but they show up every once in a while. But what it does tell us is if somebody's in a 7 through 10 initiating mode, they'll start that way, okay? They will do it, or they even may insist on doing it, okay? If they're in the 1 through 3, they're at the top, what that tells me is they won't do it, or they will resist it, okay? So they'll prevent something from happening in that mode. And in the middle, they're willing, or they will accommodate. Okay, so there is this continuum, and I always talk about it being a little bit like a hockey stick. It's not like this just gradual continuum. It's almost like the higher the number is and the lower the number is, the more rigid we become. And so there's some people that sit right in the middle that are highly accommodating, and Kolbe just doesn't even make sense for some of you, because you're like, but why can't we all get along? Why can't it just be easier? So if you're one of those people who are like, I don't understand why they have to be so rigid, first of all, we're going to find out today that they can't help themselves. And secondly, you can't help yourself but not see it as difficult either. So we are who we are. We're not going to change. Stop trying to change people. This is about identifying people's strengths and allowing them to have the opportunity to be talented at what they do every single day. Okay? All right. So I'm going to talk through the 4 modes really quickly so you just get it, and then we're going to bring our guests on. All right. So on the Fact Finder, if your highest score is 7 through 10 in Fact Finder, you will begin problem solving with give me the background, give me the research, give me the specifics, and you'll have a natural knack to dig through details. If you're somewhere in the middle, you're more of a fact checker and editor. And if you're a 1 through 3, you're going to be much more of a give me the bottom line. I always use the phrase be brief, be brilliant, be gone. That's how you feel as a 1 through 3 in Fact Finder. And the strengths that you bring as a 1 through 3 is simplification. You can help a team get out of analysis paralysis. You see the big picture and so forth, but you can imagine the conflict that it would occur between 2 people if someone is a super detailed person versus someone who's like, oh, just give me the broad strokes and let's go. And so that's one thing that we'll want to talk about is how much does the job require or not require? And what I'll tell you is this: if you tend to be somebody who's like, if I get a long email and it's paragraph on paragraph, and it comes to you and it overwhelms you, and you're like, okay, I can't even deal with this right now, you're probably not a deep fact finder. But even some of those of you who are 7s, maybe I'm a gentle fact finder, because the 8s are like a 7 times a 7, and the 9s are like an 8 times an 8 times an 8, so it gets much more extreme. So fact finder is probably the easiest one to describe. It's simply on a continuum, 1 through 3, give me the bottom line, 7 through 10, much more energy to dig through those complex strategies and go through the details. Okay, now follow through. If your highest score is follow through, you lead with what are we trying to accomplish? Why? Let's connect all the dots. If your highest score is in this area, when someone gives you a task and you don't understand how it all fits together, it's extremely exhausting and takes a lot of work. So we know that our high follow through tends to say, what are we trying to accomplish here? And they bring us focus and closure and planning and checklists to follow. My 4 through 6s are going to be much more, these are my milestones that we're achieving, as opposed to here's the plan, my 7 through 10s. And my 1 through 3s are let's just jump here. Now you've seen this happen in your agencies before, and I'm going to be a little bit of a stereotypical here, but very oftentimes our account managers and CSRs are checklist humans. And then they wonder why, because they're a 7 through 10 follow through, they're 1 through 3 producers coming in and throwing stuff at them, and they don't even remember there was an Accord app. Okay, the conflict is I need all the details, I need it in order, and frankly we constrain each other when we prevent. It's why a 7 through 10 will walk into a meeting with the agenda and expect you to follow the agenda. A 4 through 6 is like, well, these are things we should discuss during the meeting. And my 1 through 3 is like, what agenda? And frankly, by constraining them in order, the creativity goes away. Just like my high follow-throughs, if we take away their plan, their creativity goes away. So it's how do you honor that and help people? And I think the biggest thing I've found, so Stuart and Avery, I'll put you, just get you thinking about this, is one of the things that I've found most helpful for people using tools like Kolbe is it gives you language to talk about things. And it's no longer Avery doesn't want a plan. It's Avery's strength is in multitasking and pivoting quickly, where Stewart's strength is planning and helping us stay on schedule and modifying when we need. Okay, so that's how we would look at that. The third category we talk about is quick start. So quick start is your drive for experimentation and change and a sense of urgency, and they tend to brainstorm. They're always thinking in the future, what if, what if, what if? That's what a quick start is. I'm a 9, so is Avery. So we're gonna be more of a jump off the cliff. Because we're not high follow-throughs, we'll jump off the cliff without a plan. So we need you, Stewart. That's the gist of that situation. But the reality is my high quick starts are really going to be the drive. They also have a sense of urge. Let's get this done. Why aren't we done with it? Okay. My 1 through 3s are like slow down, calm down, settle down, not so many activities. So when you're changing things in an organization, we need the quick starts to drive change and innovation and take risks. And I need my 1 through 3s to be my stabilizers. We'll finish it. Let's complete it. And then we'll start the next thing. And I talk about my 4 through 6s and quick start being continuous improvement. We'll constantly change. It just won't be crazed change like my higher quick starts can drive. So that's the continuum you have with quick start. This is like the fastest course I've ever done on Kolbe. So hopefully you're hanging in with me. And then the last area is going to be what I would call implementer. And this one's taken me years to sort of sort out. In this category, if you're a 4 or higher in implementer, you're more of a show me, don't tell me person. Let me touch it. Let me see the demo. Let me play with it. Okay. Very oftentimes we don't see real high implementers in this job in insurance because we're selling something abstract. So we'll tend to find them a lot of times doing mechanical jobs and touching things, and engineers because they're very visual and so forth. But we still have a lot of them around. They just don't tend to have chosen a career to touch everything with their hands all the time, okay? I would say, in fact, the other day I was with an agency and I said, if you're a 7 through 10, if you were gonna build a house, you'd build it yourself. And this lady who was a 7 said, yeah, I built 3. So there you go. My 4 through 6s tend to be like, I always have some project going on because I like to do things with I'm energized by doing stuff with my hands. And my 1 through 3 are very abstract thinkers. They're like, who can do this for me? I have no desire to do it myself. But in the business world where it shows up, is that I could be talking about an idea, and if I have somebody who's too concrete, they can't see it, and so we miss each other. So we're going to talk about how this really helps to understand, oh, I see you need a plan to jump in. Oh, you need more information. Oh, you need less chaos, where others really thrive in those various environments, and knowing what the jobs require can be super helpful for putting people in the right seat. We're not going to spend much time on this, but we also have a group, about 10% of our population, that are what we call facilitators, and they just sit right there in the middle. They are the bridge. They're awesome. They switch between modes. They're great at following up. They'll say, oh, I see that side. Oh, I see your side. We need policies and procedures. Of course we do. And somebody else says, no, we don't. Yeah, you're right. We don't either. And they're not being wishy-washy. They can just see both sides of the argument. So they're great to throw in rooms when there's going to be a good, healthy debate about something. And then we do have about 10% of the population that will test with what's called transition. See that little asterisk at the bottom of the green bar? What that tells me, and there's no other scores with that, is that that person is probably going through something pretty stressful and they're second guessing themselves. So it's really important to know if you have somebody with transition, their scores could look wildly different later. But right now, let's take care of them because they're probably under quite a bit of exhaustion at the end of the day. All right, so that's your crash course in it. And so we're going to bring in Avery and Stewart today, so you can actually see on the screen here what their scores are. So Avery and Stewart, thank you guys for being here. And you can imagine if I'm looking at their scores, Avery's like, oh, I just showed up today, see her 9 quick start. So she's like, oh, whatever we need to do, let's do it. And then it doesn't surprise you that Stewart, being a detailed planner, might have emailed me and said, what's the plan? And I felt bad, Stewart, because I literally was on a call earlier thinking I should probably send Stewart a little bit more information. So it's not that you can't operate right without a plan, but you'll feel more comfortable knowing what the strategy is, what the plan is, and so forth. So we're going to lead with some introductions. What I love about this chart, by the way, folks, is that if you have 2 scores, you can get this beautiful report that tells you how to work with each other better. So right here, it shows there's a potential for conflict between Avery and Stewart on Fact Finder. Stewart's going to go deeper than Avery needs. That's truth. And so if you ever see somebody glazing over and you're still going, you got to check in with them. And Avery will be just as exhausting to Stewart because she's not giving him enough information. So it's equally exhausting at times. But what I love about this is that it will give us, hey, you know what, Stewart, your strength is planning and follow through, and Avery, yours is cutting quarters. Let's use you at the right times versus Avery, I need your ideas and stretch and innovate. And Stewart, maybe settle us down a little bit and let's not make sure we're jumping off every cliff that we thought was fun, right, Avery? Because we do like cliffs to jump off, that's for sure. All right, so Avery, talk to me about, I have not gotten to work with Avery so much on Kolbe. Of course, I know you're Kolbe and you do quite a bit of work with Sarah. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you were introduced, what you've done with Kolbe at a high level, and then we'll get into some specifics here in a few minutes.
Yeah. The first introduction I heard of Kolbe, which it's its own different language, was actually at the strategic plan whenever I was the young agent chairman. So I wasn't in a leadership position. I was just in sales. It wasn't anything. And I think, and I know, Mara, you came in and you coached all of us. And I think it was the first time Stuart and I were on the board at the same time together. And it was kind of this eye-opening effect. And my favorite exercise that was done is basically you gave us, or you sent us out to the room, and then you pinpointed how each of us would basically respond to the prompt that you gave us. And it was like right on target of exactly based on our Kolbe. Like, you can't be anything other than what you are. So since then, I was fortunate to buy my agency. And the one thing I wanted to do, because I knew we were off kilter on how we were hiring, is really get a good understanding of where our strengths were and then how we could communicate better, because there was a lot of tension whenever you buy a agency, whether people know it or not, is you get to redo the culture completely however you want it. And what I had found is, based on our Kolbe results, the culture was not going to be conducive to me surviving in it. Like, I was not going to be able to thrive in my own organization. And so since then, we've worked really hard and we've tried to be strategic with it. And it's a work in progress always, right?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about your leadership team in a minute. So yes, we can see there's potential for progress there. But you make a really good point, which is, especially in a time of transition and perpetuation, it's a great trigger to say, do we have the right talents, and am I surrounding myself with the strengths I don't have so that I can sit in my own strength? And it would be remiss of us to think that, boy, I'm going to be a cookie cutter version of who I'm potentially replacing in leadership. So taking the time to pause and say, let's design your job, Avery, to leverage and maximize your stretch and your innovation and all of the things that you're going to do, and put people around you that will do the things for you that you would be naturally exhausted by, but they're energized. And so it really becomes like a really nice, perfect marriage when we do it correctly that way, and not presume that everybody's got to do it the way that it used to be done.
Exactly.
Great. Good. Thank you. All right, Stewart. So talk a little bit about how you were introduced. It sounds like she outed you a little bit there, but and then what we've been doing it with you at Berrong Insurance.
Yeah, it's like Avery mentioned. The first time was at the strategic planning with the Oklahoma Big I board, and yeah, it was pretty entertaining because you pretty well nailed everybody. And I remember Adrian and being like, "Why are you guys all laughing at us?" And it's like, no, because it's literally unfolding right before our eyes. So, and that was several years back, and so we continued doing it on the board as far as seeing how you bring people on and how they're going to mesh together. And so a little while back, we did it with our leadership team and then some of our staff. And then a couple of years ago, we started implementing it on pretty much all new hires. So we kind of do an initial interview. If it seems like, hey, this person could be a good candidate, before we have any real serious conversations, we send a couple assessments, with one of the main ones being the Kolbe.
Good. So, and what we found, we'll talk a little bit about your leadership team in a minute, but when you start it with the leadership team where people can really get grounded and see for themselves, it's a good way to validate, oh, I see that this is true. Because it doesn't sometimes work to just roll it out with everyone. There's got to be an experience. The activity these two are talking about is, we call it Glop Shop. And you basically give them a bag of junk and tell them they have to build a toy or a game for kids. But we choose 3 people who are wired so differently from each other that when they're gone out of the room, you can predict this is exactly what these people are going to do, and they can't help themselves but. So, and yeah, I have learned though not to let people, nowadays people want to pull out their phones and videotape it, and then it makes it like really creepy. So we don't let people do that, because then they don't have, there's no freedom to be themselves, right? So then they quit doing what they would have done naturally because they get self-conscious. So let's check in with you here. Stewart, we'll start with on the hiring process you mentioned. And so just so folks know, what I love about Kolbe is you can define the talent that you need in the role. So there isn't like this Kolbe that you'd say, oh, this is the perfect Kolbe for this. Now we could probably presume pieces of it, but you actually do Kolbe A, which is who am I. There's a test that's called Kolbe B, what is my job? And then there's a Kolbe C, which is what am I hiring for, or what do I need in that job? And so once you know that C, what's great is you want to find somebody who looks like it, because they'll be more sustainable in a job if their A and their B job looks the same. And so we get language to attract those people. So can you talk a little bit about us using that? And you can even comment on some of the other tools you've used too, if you want.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to, maybe we're looking for an account manager. And so we'll kind of have an idea of what kind of Kolbe we're looking for and things like that. But I think most all of us know if we stumble across somebody that may fit a good producer profile, we're not going to turn them away just because we're not looking to hire them at that time. So one thing that we do when we put those out there and have people come in, I try to explain to them of like, hey, you really got to answer this just true to yourself. If you try to answer what you think we want as an answer, then you might wind up putting yourself in a job that just burns you out in the first 3 months. And so just answer it true to yourself, be natural about it. And if you fit, we'll find a role for you. And I think that helps put a bunch of people at ease as far as being more comfortable to say, okay, here's where we're coming in at. I can be myself. I can answer these questions. One of the other ones we do is the Omni. And a lot of times it's great to see how truly well they do line up of like, okay, well, they're in this range on the Omni, which is no surprise because here's where they're at on their strengths with the Kolbe. And when we bring people in at that point, then we'll have a more formal interview if we're moving forward with the candidate and be able to sit down with them and say, okay, here's what we're seeing here. How does this, relate and make sense to you? And everybody's usually always just like, well, that's spot on. It's like a high fact finder. Yes, they're more apt to have a bunch more books at home because they enjoy reading and things like that. And so it works well to structure it that way to bring people in.
Yeah, good. No, and I love that you bring up, we always say try and test people as soon as you can when you meet them. If you think, well, this is a dynamic person, I want them in, test them immediately, because then you know what type of role to work towards with them, as opposed to talking about like, well, you'll be great here, and they want it, and then they realize, oh, I'm not wired for it, and you either lose them or you think, well, I shouldn't hire them. So I love having that position where you're sort of saying, now that I know who you are, how do we design a role that really plays to your strengths, which really does focus on that strengths-based organization. Right. Avery, talk to me about you guys in the hiring process and how you're using it right now.
Yeah. Ours, we really had to rebuild our hiring process from the inside out. And I can tell you over the past 3 years, we were hit with COVID and the post-COVID, we really nailed it down. But what we had done is we had never used it before whenever we were looking at hiring. And so we knew whenever we did the initial test with Kolbe that we had a ton of fact finders and we had follow through, which we were usually hiring for CSRs and account managers. So great. We wanted them to have all those skills. Where we realized we were really missing was that little bridge maker on there. Is either me and the leadership team were always trying to change our personalities to someone else, which is exhausting to come in and just not to be able yourself, which we have to do that in sales. I get it. But when you're managing people, it really helps to have someone that can communicate both sides of the equation. So we were missing that. And then at the same time too, like I said, I was a quick start. So whatever cliff I saw, I was jumping there and there was a squirrel here. And so to come in and basically find and build out a leadership team that could communicate downwise and then hire the people to fill in the positions there became our goal. And we all know this too. Hiring is really hard right now, and it doesn't help that our agency is in a rural little part of Oklahoma. And so it's made us be really, really picky, if I'm being honest. And through the interview process, we would do it right before the final interview. And what we also ended up finding is that people can have a really romantic view of how they handle conflict or how they communicate. And based on their Kolbe, we could see right away of like, hey, if the XYZ happened, how would you go about handling this? And they would basically say something of like, well, I would go and I would try to find out all the information, when their Kolbe would say like it would be the very opposite of it. They were going to jump off a cliff and probably do something different. So that became interesting as you learn to read people. We paired it with the Enneagram, which for us fits into our culture. We're able to figure out from that and the Kolbe, they mesh together really beautifully in the sense that we knew that quick starts are usually going to be closer to where I'm sitting. So like I'm an Enneagram 7, want to go have fun. We were finding that characteristics tied into it, which we found with Enneagram. We were hiring a lot of 6s, which went really well with fact finders and follow throughs. And since then, we've tried to change how we hire on both sides. So I think we've gone the other way. Like it was like, let's go one direction really strong, and now let's go back the other. So by next year, when I talk to you, Mara, it's going to be in the middle. I promise.
Good. Well, it is a balancing act. And one of the things that, I know everyone's in what I would call hiring mode, but, taking the time and being disciplined about constantly assessing candidates that you think are qualified. They may not be in the right role right now, but when you need them, how to switch them over, right? And being able to talk to them about, we're going to bring you in. This might not fit exactly, but this is where we're headed towards. That will sustain, as opposed to bringing somebody in and saying, you're going to be super detailed and organized, and we're going to force you to do that for 2 years before we let you go use your strengths, which is hopscotching around and being creative and jumping off cliffs without plans, because that's what some of our salespeople do. And then what I will also say, because we've done so much work now with people, is that just because somebody's not a high quick start, so I'll use Stewart, he's a 4 quick start, but marrying up those strengths that are discipline and focus and achiever, they can be extremely successful producers. It's just knowing then how to position them. I would say to a Stewart, let's not be a generalist. Let's get you specialized and do that over and over again and get your expertise up so that you feel less risk. So there's ways to really coach folks on, we can take any Kolbe if we know how they fit on a personality profile and see if it will work in various positions. Okay, good. So, and what I will say is using that Kolbe C, what do I need, can really help write the job description in such a way that somebody would be like, oh, gross, I don't want that job, or, oh, that sounds amazing, I want it. And that's the reaction that you're looking for at the end of the day. All right, I'm going to have us jump over, Avery, to your leadership team, and let's just talk about the composition here for a minute. So I know that you guys are new at this, but we'll just give you guys the look at. What you can see here is that 80% of our leadership team has a 7 through 10 Kolbe. So this 120%, that's Avery. And then you can see that they also have this huge propensity for planning with follow through. And then once again, here's Avery. Can we see the outlier? You must be lonely, Avery. And then you're all by yourself. But the red shows us where the group think is that she has, which is, let's be thorough, let's be organized, let's drive it to closure, which is that 60%, and let's imagine. But what I'm looking at here are 2 things. One is, where is their dominance, which you can see where it is. And this would also be an organization where we'd say, Avery's going to be the outlier pushing for growth, and we could grow 20%. We're not going to grow just 10. Like, that's the push naturally. But the other thing I'm looking for is, if you look across the bars, ideal synergy is I've got 25% of my energy at the top, 25% at the bottom. And this is what you were talking about, Avery, right? With having that bridge, you didn't have it. And that creates polarization on a team as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I'll talk about the beginning. When I came on, I had my CFO, and what you want from a CFO is going to be very different than what I wanted from a COO. And so I want my CFO to be very rigid. Like when you're handling finances, right, you should be very black and white. And so looking at it is I knew that we had to make a pivot on how we handled people. And so that's whenever I decided to bring in my COO. And one of the things we strategically did, which it looks like it's off kilter, but it's working for us, is that I wanted someone that could bridge my quick start and then go communicate it down to people that would build out the systems, which is we have basically 4 people in leadership, and 2 of them are going to be the personal lines manager and the commercial lines manager. And then I have my CFO and my COO. And so she's able to go and basically translate my vision, my dream. And she's honestly really awesome. She always says, Avery, if you dream it, like I'll build it. And that's what you want. And so I had to work really hard, to hire to my weaknesses, which my weaknesses is going to be building out systems, finding all the facts in it. Although I'm the bridge on the fact finder, I can do it a little bit, but probably not to their perfect idea. And then 2, whenever they're doing that is how do you communicate it? And I wasn't doing a good job. Like I just had to be honest with myself that with my team, like I wasn't able to converse it in a right way. So now we're in a good balance where my COO can go and do that with my people and I can communicate with her. And so it's kind of a nice little flow.
Yeah, good. And knowing what you're dealing with just makes it all a bit easier, right, to deal with that. So that's awesome. All right, so we're going to jump over to you, Stuart, here and look at your slide. And what you see here is, here we go. On the left is Stuart and his partners. And you can see, again, some propensity here for 75% fact finder. They don't have much on the follow through, right? There are a lot in the middle there. And so frankly, this is you, Stuart, having to do all the planning. And then the team is, varied from a standpoint of quick start. And so not terrible, but yet you could see that you really fall into like, gee, we're really looking at a lot of details. And so do you want to talk about that for a minute? And then we added somebody, not in the leadership role, but somebody who would support the team in the middle and what that did for you guys as a team overall.
Yeah, well, you've used the phrase earlier, the analysis paralysis. And so after looking at this, as far as leadership and our management team, we realized why some of our meetings sometimes would run way too long, talking hours. And it's just because we've got all of us as fact finders sitting there trying to talk it through. And very fitting. It's analysis paralysis. It takes forever to get things done. Well, then we brought somebody in who in the beginning, I was convinced was a quick start, because we brought him in kind of an entry level role. It was right before we started having all the staff be at Kolbe's. And she was like, can I get bins to organize everything in the kitchen? Can I do, get all our supplies reorganized? And I saw it as like, she keeps taking on all these new projects. Well, of course, when her Kolbe comes in, we find out she's a high follow through. And in hindsight, it was 2020, because it was like, oh, that's it. It's not that she's a quick start. She wants to build all these systems and wants to get things going. So we've since started moving her into she likes to call it director of company culture, kind of a hybrid HR, COO type position. Whereas now when we get into this analysis paralysis, she steps in and says, hold on, let me start putting this together. Let me organize this. So she went from doing some basic literal physical organizations in the building to now has formalized our interview and onboarding process for new hires, has started building out, evaluations for employees, has worked on and cleaned up all of our policies and procedures since we made the change over to Epic. And so it's been a huge transition for us, because now we have this person in this role that can take all the things that we're saying need to get done, but we don't get it done, and now puts it together, puts it into her system and builds it. And now we have more of a stability between the staff and all of us as leadership that are high fact finders.
Great, good. Yeah, you can definitely see in that mix of going from we've got a lot going on to now someone's taking it, driving closure, and they're energized by that, as opposed to you guys having to grind against yours. So we are wrapping up here real quick. So I would love, just like if somebody's brand new to Kolbe, obviously Sarah's available to support you guys and get you going. Is there a piece of advice that Avery you'd give to somebody who might be interested in dabbling in this?
I would probably say like find an expert in it, because what is information if you don't put it to use? It's the same with all the data we have with our agency. So I think our COO has taken multiple courses to where we implement it in the culture, because the team has to understand what you're saying too, and they also have the freedom and the ability to understand it. That way, when you have the conversation of basically saying like, there's frustration on your part, I sense it because I didn't give you XYZ information, how do we fix it? If they don't have that background in the Kolbe, then they're not going to understand it.
Yeah, good. Great. So, and it needs to be reinforced over and over again, right? And really positioning it from, we're giving you the language to talk about your strengths, and let's put you in a position of strength as often as possible. How about you, Stuart, if you were going to give anybody some advice?
I'd say just once you get going with it, whether you start with your leadership, you really need to go all in and make sure you have all your staff do it so that you see all the pieces that you currently have, because you might find somebody that you thought maybe just wasn't being as productive as you thought they should be, only to find out, well, it's because I'm making them work against their grain and we need to tweak their job responsibilities a little bit more. And then to Avery's point, once you get that worked into the culture, then any of your new hiring process, it's just natural that it comes in. And, when it is part of the culture, sometimes there'll be a little bit of kidding here and there. Somebody might send an email and be like, oh my goodness, this is a fact finder's email because there's 8 paragraphs that could have been done in 3 sentences. Yes. And so, but it loosens it a little bit. It's been more jovial, and they'll even send an email and be like, sorry, I tried to trim it down, but I'm a 9 fact finder. You guys are going to have to bear with me. And, what used to be frustration of like, why are we getting these long emails, is now it's kind of like, okay, well, we know, and then it balances it. And as you work with your other staff and you get them to understand it, it's like, okay, I do know when I message this, I'm going to have to give a little bit more info, but when I message this person over here, it's a quick exchange of ideas. And it's not that anybody's right or wrong, but when you can understand each other, it's easier to communicate and then get bigger projects done, because you can bring 3 or 4 people together because you need the big ideas, you need somebody to systematize it, and then you got to have somebody that wants to build it and implement. And so if you get all of those pieces put together, then it just makes everything flow a lot better.
Great. Good. Well, we're at the top of the hour here, so I wanted to thank both of you guys for spending some time. Obviously, for folks, with the other programs that you have are all available on YouTube. So if you want to go watch some of the past AgencyWISE, I'm sure Avery and Stuart would love to connect with you guys so you can catch them at a Big Eye, Oklahoma event or a Young Agent event, or check them out on LinkedIn. And guys for being part of it. Have a great day, and I hope this is a little bit of a dose that'll help you in your agency every single day.